Don't move, Amelia. They need to see what obedience looks like. Victor's belt slashed through the air, striking her skin as his friends roared with laughter. She stood silent, every muscle screaming, but her pride refusing to bend. That night, he thought he had won. He didn't see the bag she would pack before dawn. He didn't know the woman he mocked would one day strip him of every empire brick by brick, and return not as his victim, but as his conqueror. Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more stories like this. The Hale mansion always smelled of Polish and roses. Every morning, Amelia Cross Hale walked through its grand hall with its marble floor shining like glass, carrying a silver tray of tea. It was the kind of house people stopped to stare at when they passed through the iron gates. Perfect gardens, statues imported from Italy, cars that gleamed like black mirrors. To the world, it was a palace. To Amelia, it was a cage. She moved quietly, as though even her footsteps might disturb Victor's mood. He was a man who liked silence when he read his newspaper, silence when he shaved, silence when he walked into his office. Her voice was used sparingly, like a tool she could only bring out when necessary. That morning, Victor sat at the breakfast table dressed in a navy suit, his blonde hair slicked back, the newspaper spread wide in his hands. He didn't look up as she placed the tea on the table. "Careful," he muttered, his eyes still on the paper. "Last time you nearly spilled it." "I didn't," Amelia answered softly. Victor lowered the paper just enough to show his pale blue eyes, sharp as ice. "What did you say?" Amelia lowered her gaze quickly. "Nothing. Here's your tea." Satisfied, he went back to reading. Amelia stood there for a moment, her hands folded in front of her. She always waited, because if she left too quickly, he might snap his fingers and demand she return. Sometimes he only did it to remind her she was his servant as much as his wife. Victor finally said, "I'm having guests tonight. Some of the partners from the bank. I want everything perfect. Food, wine, the house, all of it. You'll wear the silver dress." "Yes, Victor." He folded the newspaper neatly, took a sip of tea, and added, "And try not to look so dull. Smile. Be pleasant. People judge a man by his wife. Do you understand?" "Yes, Victor," Amelia repeated, her voice steady. She walked out of the dining room, her hands trembling slightly, though she kept her face composed. The mansion was spotless, but she still dusted every surface twice, arranged flowers in tall crystal vases, and polished the silverware until her reflection looked back at her. On the outside, she looked like a picture-perfect wife, young, graceful, obedient. On the inside, she felt small, like a bird pressing its wings against cage bars. As she worked, she thought about the girl she used to be before Victor. A girl who laughed loudly at silly things, who danced barefoot in her tiny flat when no one was watching, who dreamed of starting her own small shop. That girl was gone. Victor had made sure of it with his rules, his cutting words, his punishments when she forgot her place. The mansion was filled with art, chandeliers, and designer furniture, but to Amelia it felt like living inside a museum where nothing belonged to her. She couldn't touch, couldn't breathe too freely. Every smile was rehearsed, every step measured. That night, she put on the silver dress Victor demanded. It fit perfectly, almost too perfectly, as though even her clothing had been designed to trap her in place. She painted on a soft smile, the one Victor approved of, pleasant but never too bright, never too real. When she looked in the mirror before going downstairs, she whispered to herself, "Just get through tonight." The dining room glowed with golden light. Crystal glasses lined the table, tall candles flickered, and the air smelled of roasted lamb and herbs. The guests arrived in expensive suits and glittering gowns, their laughter filling the house. They greeted Victor with respect, shaking his hand firmly, their voices loud with admiration. "Victor Hale. The man of the hour," one of them said. "You always host the finest dinners." Victor smiled proudly, clapping the man's shoulder. "Of course I do. I believe in excellence, in business, in life, and at home. Isn't that right, Amelia?" Amelia stood by his side, smiling softly as the men's eyes turned to her. "Yes," she said, her voice calm. That's right. They all moved to the table, eating and drinking as conversations flowed. Victor boasted about his recent deals, his investments, the way he handled difficult clients. Amelia served wine, filled glasses, and laughed at the right moments, even when nothing was funny. Halfway through the evening, after the main course, the conversation shifted. One of Victor's friends, a red-faced man with a loud voice, joked, "Well, Victor, we all know you run the best deals. But tell me, do you run your house the same way? Women can be tricky. They like to think they're in charge." The table chuckled. Amelia's stomach tightened. She kept her smile, but she felt her pulse quicken. Victor leaned back in his chair, a smirk spreading across his face. My dear Amelia knows her place. She doesn't argue, she doesn't question. A man's house must have order. Someone raised an eyebrow, grinning. Oh? And what if she ever disobeys? Victor's smirk deepened. He stood slowly, taking off his suit jacket and laying it across the chair. Let me show you. Amelia's blood ran cold. Victor, she whispered, her voice meant only for him. Not here, please. But Victor ignored her. He reached for his belt, sliding it from the loops with a hiss. The guests laughed nervously, unsure if this was serious or just a show. Stand up, Amelia, Victor commanded. Her hands shook under the table, but she forced them still. Every eye was on her. She wanted to refuse, but she knew that would only make it worse. Slowly, she rose to her feet, her silver dress catching the candlelight. Victor stepped behind her, folding the belt in his hand. A wife must know who leads in the house. Watch closely, gentlemen. This is why I never have trouble. The first strike landed across her back with a sharp crack. The guests gasped. One of the women covered her mouth. Another man muttered, "Good God, Victor." Amelia stood tall, her face calm, her body rigid. The pain burned like fire, but she refused to flinch. She would not give him the satisfaction. Her eyes stared straight ahead, unfocused, like glass. Victor struck her again, harder this time. See, he said proudly, holding up the belt. She obeys. Discipline makes perfection. The room was silent, uncomfortable. A few men gave forced laughs, trying to ease the tension, but most looked down at their plates. Amelia said nothing. She held her breath, her body trembling with pain but her face calm, almost serene. After a few more strikes, Victor tossed the belt aside and returned to his chair, beaming as though he'd just performed a clever trick. And that, he declared, is how you keep a household in line. The guests clapped weakly, their smiles stiff. Some avoided Amelia's eyes entirely. She smoothed her dress with steady hands and sat down again, silent as stone. The laughter and chatter returned slowly, forced at first, then louder as people tried to pretend nothing had happened. But Amelia heard nothing. She felt the fire across her back, the sting of humiliation sharper than the pain. She kept her face neutral, but inside something broke, and something else sparked. She thought, never again. This is the last time. The dinner carried on, but Amelia barely tasted the food, barely heard the voices around her. She was somewhere else already, in a place where Victor no longer had power over her, in a future where she stood free. As the guests laughed and toasted, Amelia sat quietly in her silver dress, her heart whispering one clear truth: tonight changes everything. The mansion was quiet. The laughter from the evening had long since faded. Upstairs, the grand bedroom was dim except for the faint glow of a lamp. Victor snored heavily, sprawled across the king-sized bed like a king who had conquered his world. Amelia lay stiff beside him, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Her back throbbed from the belt, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the burning humiliation. The memory of the guests' eyes, some pitying, some avoiding her altogether, was worse than the strikes themselves. She turned her face toward Victor. His mouth hung open slightly, his breath sour with wine. He looked harmless in sleep, almost boyish. But Amelia knew the monster that lived behind that face. A man who believed control was the same as love. A man who broke her down piece by piece until she barely recognized herself. Her heart pounded. This is it. No more waiting. No more hoping he'll change. If I don't leave tonight, I never will. Carefully, she slid out of bed, her bare feet silent against the rug. She grabbed her robe and slipped it on. The house felt colder at night, the grand hallways shadowed and watchful. She made her way to the closet, pulling out a small duffel bag she had hidden behind shoe boxes weeks ago. For months she had been quietly preparing, putting aside bits of cash from grocery runs, hiding it in a worn book only she ever opened. She stuffed clothes into the bag, simple things, nothing fancy. She tucked in the envelope of cash, her ID, and one photograph of her younger self, smiling with her hair blowing in the wind. That girl, she thought, deserved another chance. As she zipped the bag, she froze. Victor stirred in the bed, grumbling, then rolled over. Amelia's breath caught, her entire body rigid. She waited, heart hammering. But he didn't wake. His snore returned, steady and loud. Silently, she slipped out of the room. Every step down the staircase felt like stepping across glass. If Victor woke and saw her, if he called out her name, she didn't know what she would do. But the house remained still. She passed through the kitchen, through the back hallway, and finally reached the servants' entrance. She turned the brass knob slowly, the old hinge groaning faintly. She winced, but no sound came from upstairs. Then she was outside. The night air hit her like a wave of freedom, cold, sharp, real. She stood for a moment on the gravel drive, staring at the iron gates that had kept her locked in for so long. She pulled the robe tighter around her, then stepped forward. The gravel crunched beneath her shoes, every sound amplified in the silence. Her plan was simple: walk to the main road, take a bus into the city, and disappear. She had no grand destination. All she wanted was a way. By the time she reached the bus station, her legs ached, and her hands trembled. She bought a ticket with shaky fingers, avoiding the cashier's eyes. She boarded, sitting at the back, clutching the duffel bag to her chest. The bus engine roared to life, pulling away from the station. Amelia pressed her forehead to the glass, watching the lights of the wealthy district shrink into the distance. For the first time in years, she smiled, not the polite smile Victor demanded, but a true one, small and trembling. Her whisper fogged the glass. I'm free. The city felt like another world. No polished marble floors, no manicured gardens, just the buzz of traffic, the chatter of strangers, the smell of fried food and car exhaust. Amelia walked the streets with her bag slung over her shoulder, her body sore but her spirit awake. The noise, the mess, the freedom, it all felt overwhelming. But freedom didn't mean safety. She had nowhere to sleep. Her money was little, and she knew Victor would start looking for her as soon as he woke. He had influence, connections, and money enough to make her disappearance difficult. By morning, Amelia found herself sitting on a bench outside a cafe, exhausted and unsure of her next step. That's when a kind-looking woman in a grey coat approached her. She had short brown hair, warm eyes, and a gentle voice. "Are you all right, love?" the woman asked softly. Amelia hesitated. She had learned to hide her feelings, to keep secrets. But something in the woman's tone, so genuine, so patient, broke through her guard. Tears welled in her eyes. I just left my husband. I have nowhere to go." The woman's expression softened with understanding. "My name's Helen Parker. I work at a shelter for women. If you'd like, I can take you there. It's safe." Amelia swallowed, torn between trust and fear. But she had no other choice. She nodded. Helen led her to a small brick building tucked between a library and a laundromat. The sign read, Haven House. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and soap. The reception area had mismatched furniture but felt warm, alive. Women sat in small groups, some laughing quietly, others whispering. A few children played in the corner with donated toys. "This is where I work," Helen explained. "We help women start over. You'll have a bed, meals, and no one here will ask questions you're not ready to answer." Amelia blinked back tears. Thank you. Helen placed a hand on her shoulder. You're safe now. The room they gave her was small, with 2 single beds, a nightstand, and a cracked window that let in the morning sun. Amelia sank onto the mattress, gripping her duffel bag. For the first time in years, she could close her eyes without fear of Victor's footsteps approaching. She slept deeply, like a woman who had been holding her breath for too long. Days passed, and slowly Amelia began to adjust. At first she kept to herself, eating meals quietly, avoiding too much conversation. But the other women at the shelter welcomed her in gentle ways. One woman offered her tea, another gave her a scarf. Amelia realized she wasn't alone. Her story wasn't the only one of pain and escape. One afternoon, Helen introduced her to a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a calm voice. His name was Martin Cole. He was a retired businessman who volunteered at the shelter, teaching financial basics to women trying to rebuild their lives. Miss Hale, Martin said politely, shaking her hand. Just Amelia, she corrected, almost shyly. Amelia, then, Martin said warmly. Helen tells me you're sharp. That you used to handle your household accounts. Amelia gave a small, sad smile. Victor never trusted me with the big things. But I paid attention. I learned to read contracts, balance expenses, track spending. He thought I was too simple to understand, but I did. Martin's eyes lit with interest. That's a start. More than a start. Numbers don't lie, Amelia. If you can understand them, you can build anything. Amelia tilted her head. Build what? A future, Martin said simply. That word struck her. For years she hadn't thought of the future, only survival. The idea that she could build something stirred something new inside her. A spark. Martin began tutoring her in small sessions at the shelter. They spread out papers on the kitchen table, working through budgets and mock business plans. At first, Amelia struggled. Her confidence was brittle, her hands shaking as she wrote. But Martin's patience never wavered. You have a natural eye, he told her one afternoon. Most people get lost in the details, but you see the patterns. That's rare. Amelia felt warmth in her chest. I never thought I could do this. Of course you can, Martin said firmly. You're not weak, Amelia. You've been caged. But cages don't break the bird, they just hide its wings. She looked at him, surprised by the strength in his words. She thought of the girl she used to be, laughing barefoot. She thought of the silver dress and the belt. And for the first time, she didn't feel small. She felt the wings shifting, stretching. Evenings at Haven House became her new rhythm. She worked part-time jobs, cleaning offices, waiting tables, while returning to the shelter to study with Martin. Helen encouraged her to attend group sessions, where women shared their stories. Amelia listened, sometimes spoke, and slowly began to feel less alone in her pain. One night, lying in her small bed, Amelia whispered into the darkness, I will never be powerless again. The words didn't sound like hope anymore. They sounded like a promise. The city did not care about Amelia Cross. It did not care about her bruised back, her sleepless nights, or the husband she had escaped. The city was a machine, fast and ruthless, chewing up anyone who couldn't keep up. But for Amelia, anonymity was a gift. Her morning started early, walking across cracked pavements in worn shoes to clean offices before the staff arrived. She carried her bucket and mop, scrubbing coffee stains from carpets and wiping fingerprints from glass doors. The pay was low, but it was honest, and every note she folded into her purse was hers. At noon, she often took shifts at a small diner. The uniform smelled of grease, and customers snapped their fingers for coffee refills. She smiled politely, jotting down orders, but behind her calm expression, her mind ticked with numbers. She counted tips, calculated shifts, and even advised a coworker on how to save money for rent. You should split your pay into envelopes, Amelia explained to the young waitress beside her. One for bills, one for food, one for savings. That way, you'll always know what's left. The girl blinked at her. You sound like a banker. Amelia laughed softly. No. Just someone who's had to learn the hard way. Evenings brought her back to Haven House, where Martin Cole waited with his patient smile and stacks of papers. Ready to wrestle numbers again, he would tease, pushing a notebook toward her. Yes, Amelia would answer, rolling up her sleeves. Teach me. They began with basics, profit and loss, savings, investments. But Amelia's mind, hungry and sharp, soaked it all in quickly. She had spent years living under Victor's control, silently observing how he spoke to investors, how he made deals. She remembered the conversations she wasn't supposed to understand, the contracts she was never meant to read. Now, with Martin guiding her, she connected the dots. You're quick, Martin said one night, pointing at the tidy columns she had filled. Quicker than most people I ever trained in business. Amelia shook her head. I don't feel quick. I feel desperate. Martin's gaze softened. Desperation can break a person, but in the right hands, it can build fire. You have fire, Amelia. Don't waste it. His words stuck with her. Over the weeks, Amelia began helping other women at the shelter. One was drowning in debt from credit cards. Another had no idea how to budget her small paycheck. Amelia sat with them, walking through numbers with patience. See here, she explained to one woman, circling a figure on the page. If you cut out the extra loan payments with high interest, you can redirect that money to essentials. Little steps, but they matter. Word spread inside Haven House. Ask Amelia. She knows numbers. And with every woman she helped, Amelia felt her confidence growing. But life wasn't suddenly easy. Some nights she went to bed hungry so she could save a little more. Some mornings she woke with aching hands from scrubbing floors. Yet every day she whispered to herself, I will never be powerless again. The idea came to her one night as she stared at the ceiling of her shelter room. She had been advising women for weeks, unpaid, just out of kindness. But what if she turned this into more? What if I built something of my own? The thought terrified her. It also thrilled her. The next morning, she approached Martin, clutching her notebook. I want to start something, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Something. A consultancy, she explained. Not a big one. Just me, at first. Helping small businesses, or women who don't understand finances. I already do it here, for free. Why not do it properly? Martin studied her for a long moment, then smiled slowly. There it is. There what is? The spark I've been waiting to see, he said. The one that says you're not just surviving anymore. You're planning. Amelia exhaled shakily. Do you think I could? I think, Martin said firmly, you can and you must. The next weeks were a storm of preparation. Martin helped her draft a business plan. Helen encouraged her, offering the shelter's office printer for paperwork. Amelia spent every free hour sketching names, logos, services. Finally, she settled on a name, Cross Solutions. It's perfect, Helen said when she saw it. It's your name, but it also means crossroads. People come to you when they need direction. The first days of Cross Solutions were nothing glamorous. Amelia rented a tiny desk in a shared office space. She couldn't afford a receptionist or staff. She printed flyers on cheap paper and posted them in cafes, libraries, and community boards. Her office was just a chair, a laptop, and a heart full of determination. The beginning was brutal. Potential clients ignored her. Emails went unanswered. Some laughed at the idea of a woman without credentials advising on business. Amelia swallowed every rejection, went back to her desk, and tried again. One evening, when the office was nearly empty, Martin visited. He saw the slump in her shoulders and asked, How many rejections today? 5, Amelia admitted. That makes 37 in total. Martin chuckled softly. Good. Good, she echoed, incredulous. It means you're trying, he said. 37 no's mean you're 37 closer to a yes. His calm confidence steadied her. And sure enough, her first yes came not long after. A struggling cafe owner, desperate to save her shop, took a chance on Amelia. She sat at a corner table with the woman, combing through receipts and expenses. You're losing money on the menu design, Amelia explained gently. Too many items, too much waste. Simplify. Focus on the sellers, cut the rest. And negotiate with your suppliers, you're paying too much. The woman frowned, skeptical. But she followed the advice. Within 2 months, her profits had stabilized. She told others about Amelia, and slowly, referrals trickled in. Cross Solutions began to grow. Amelia worked nights and weekends, pouring herself into each client. She didn't just talk numbers, she listened to their fears, their dreams. She became more than a consultant, she became a guide. Women especially trusted her, sensing the quiet strength beneath her calm tone. You get it, one client told her. You know what it's like to feel powerless. That's why I trust you. Those words struck deep. Amelia realized she wasn't just building a business, she was building a mission. Soon she could afford her own small office, 1 room, second-hand furniture, and a cracked window overlooking the street. But to her, it was a palace. She bought a plant for the desk, framed her modest certificate of business registration, and wrote in her journal that night, "This is mine. No one can take it away." Her rise wasn't overnight. There were setbacks, sleepless nights, moments of doubt. But with every client saved from bankruptcy, every woman who walked out with new confidence, Amelia's reputation grew. Victor, meanwhile, spiraled. News of his risky ventures failing sometimes reached Amelia through whispers in the business community. She never smiled at his downfall. Not yet. She only worked harder, building brick by brick, while his empire quietly cracked. By the end of the year, Cross Solutions was no longer just Amelia at a desk. She had hired 2 assistants, both women from Haven House who had been searching for purpose. She gave them fair pay, respect, and encouragement, the very things Victor had denied her for years. When she stood in her small office, watching her team laugh as they worked, Amelia felt something powerful. Not revenge, not yet, something deeper. She was building an empire of her own. And unlike Victor's, it was an empire rooted not in fear, but in dignity. The office smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee. It was modest, only 2 rooms and a flickering ceiling light, but to Amelia Cross, it felt like a fortress she had built brick by brick. Her desk was stacked with files and receipts, yet her eyes sparkled as she leaned forward to hear a client's worries. A small business owner, a young woman who ran a bakery, sat across from her, wringing her hands. "I can't keep up with rent," the woman confessed. "I've already borrowed from friends. I'm sinking." Amelia placed her pen down and spoke gently but firmly. "Let's look at everything. Not just the debts. What's coming in? What's leaving? We'll find the gaps." For 2 hours they worked through the numbers. Amelia noticed patterns immediately: wasted ingredients, oversized batches, poor supplier contracts. She sketched a new plan, guiding the woman step by step. "You're not sinking," Amelia said at last. "You're floating in the wrong direction. Let me turn the boat around." Tears filled the baker's eyes. "Why are you helping me so much?" Amelia gave a small smile. "Because I know what it's like to feel powerless. And I promised myself I would never let another woman feel the way I did." Weeks turned into months, and Cross Solutions blossomed. 1 client turned into 3, then 10. Small businesses trusted Amelia because she didn't just talk profits, she listened. She understood fear, loss, desperation. Soon, Amelia hired more women, carefully choosing those who had once been dismissed or underestimated. Each of them carried scars, but in her office, those scars became strength. They worked late nights together, fueled by cheap takeout and laughter. Her team began calling her Miss Cross out of respect, but she always shook her head. "Just Amelia. Titles don't build empires, people do. Meanwhile, the city whispered of Victor Hale. He had once been untouchable, his name on buildings, his picture in glossy magazines. But Amelia heard things through investors, overheard conversations at events, bad loans, failed ventures, lawsuits. One evening, Helen Parker visited Amelia's office with a smile. "Have you seen the news?" Amelia shook her head, setting aside her notes. Helen dropped a newspaper onto the desk. The headline screamed, "Victor Hale faces financial troubles after failed deal." Amelia's hands trembled slightly as she read. She expected to feel giddy, triumphant. Instead, she felt quiet. She whispered, "So the cracks are showing." Helen nodded. "And you're rising." Amelia closed the paper slowly. "Not fast enough. Not yet. But soon." Her breakthrough came with a chance meeting. A mid-sized tech startup, desperate after failed management, called her in. The board expected a typical consultant in a stiff suit. Instead, Amelia arrived in her simple blazer, carrying nothing but her notebook. The CEO frowned. "You don't look like a consultant." Amelia met his gaze calmly. "And yet, you called me." She spent 3 weeks immersed in their operations, working with staff, rebuilding their financial model from the inside. At the final meeting, she stood at the head of a long table filled with skeptical board members. "Here are your choices," she said, her voice clear. "Keep doing what you're doing and collapse within 6 months. Or follow this plan, cut waste, restructure contracts, rebuild your marketing, and not only will you survive, you'll grow." The room was silent. Finally, the CEO leaned forward. "And if we fail?" Amelia's reply was steady. "Then fire me. But I won't fail." They gave her a chance. Within a year, the company doubled profits. News spread. Cross Solutions was not just another consultancy. It was the consultancy. Investors began approaching her. Business magazines asked for interviews. Other consultants, mostly men who once dismissed her, suddenly spoke her name with grudging respect. And Amelia, standing in her growing office, realized the tide had turned. She was no longer running from her past. She was running toward her empire. The auction hall buzzed with murmurs. Rows of chairs filled the grand room, where chandeliers cast glittering light onto polished floors. Wealthy bidders adjusted their ties, whispering over catalogs of items for sale, mansions, cars, businesses, all once belonging to the same man. Victor Hale. He sat near the front, his jaw tight, his eyes bloodshot. Gone was the confident smile, the arrogance. His suit was pressed, but it could not hide the exhaustion etched into his face. He looked like a man clutching sand as it poured through his fingers. Amelia entered quietly, dressed in a sleek black dress, her hair pulled back. Her presence was calm, almost invisible among the glittering crowd. Beside her sat Martin Cole, his sharp eyes scanning the room. "Are you ready?" he whispered. Amelia's lips curved slightly. "I've been ready for years." The auctioneer began. First item, Hale Manor, the estate at Greyston Hill. Opening bid, £1 million. Bidders raised their paddles. Numbers climbed quickly, 1.1, 1.2. Amelia waited, her paddle resting lightly in her hand. Finally, as the bidding slowed, she lifted it. 1.5. The room turned. A few whispered. Who was this woman with such calm poise? Victor's head snapped toward her, suspicion flickering in his eyes. But he didn't recognize her. Not yet. The hammer fell. Sold. 1.5 million. Amelia exhaled softly. One piece of him, now hers. The auction continued. Properties, cars, businesses. Amelia bid strategically, never flinching, never hesitating. Each time her paddle rose, Victor grew more restless. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering furiously. His empire was vanishing before his eyes, piece by piece. Finally, the last major lot arrived, Hale Enterprises headquarters, the very heart of Victor's name. Opening bid, £3 million, the auctioneer announced. Silence fell. Then Amelia's paddle lifted. 3 million. Victor shot to his feet. Who is she? He demanded, his voice loud enough to echo. Who keeps buying everything? The auctioneer frowned. Sir, please, sit down. But Victor would not. His eyes scanned the room, searching, until they landed on Amelia. For a moment, confusion clouded his face. Then recognition struck like lightning. His mouth opened in shock. No, he whispered. It can't be. Amelia met his gaze steadily. Calm. Unshaken. She said nothing, letting silence answer for her. The gavel slammed down. Sold. The meeting afterward was inevitable. In a quiet boardroom, Victor stormed in, his face twisted with rage. You, he hissed. You dare, after everything, you come back to destroy me. Amelia stood tall, her posture regal, her voice measured. No, Victor. I didn't come back to destroy you. You destroyed yourself. I only collected the pieces. His fists clenched. You were nothing without me. Her eyes were sharp as steel. No, Victor. I was nothing because of you. Without you, I became everything. The words cut deeper than any belt ever had. Victor staggered back, pale, his bravado crumbling. For years, he had lived in power, feeding off control. Now, stripped of it all, he looked small. Amelia picked up the deed papers from the table, sliding them into her bag with calm precision. Then she turned to leave. At the door, she paused, glancing back once. Enjoy your freedom, Victor. You have nothing left to cage. And with that, she walked out, leaving him broken in the ruins of his empire. The boardroom smelled faintly of stale coffee and polished wood. A long mahogany table stretched down the center, surrounded by leather chairs. The walls, once lined with Victor Hale's framed awards and photographs, now stood bare. Auctioneers had already removed most of them, leaving pale rectangles where his empire used to shine. Victor paced the floor like a trapped animal. His tie hung loose, his face pale with exhaustion, though his eyes still burned with a flicker of defiance. He muttered under his breath, fists clenched, as though rehearsing arguments to a jury only he could hear. The door opened. Amelia stepped in. She wore no jewels, no glittering gown, only a tailored black suit that spoke of quiet authority. Her posture was upright, her movements controlled. Behind her followed Martin Cole, calm and steady, holding a slim folder of contracts. Victor froze when he saw her, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. His lips parted, as if he could not quite believe the figure before him. Amelia. His voice cracked. Amelia said nothing. She set her bag on the table and began arranging papers with precise movements. She did not look at him until she was ready. When her gaze finally met his, it was steady, cold but not cruel. Victor stepped closer, his voice rising. How? How are you here? How are you the one buying everything I built? Amelia's tone was calm, almost detached. Because while you were wasting, I was building. While you flaunted, I studied. While you drowned in arrogance, I learned to swim. Victor's hands shook. You can't do this. These are my businesses, my properties, my name. Amelia's reply cut through the room like glass. No, Victor. They were yours. You lost them. And now, they are mine. He slammed a fist against the table. The sound echoed, sharp and desperate. You're nothing but a woman I made. I fed you, clothed you, gave you everything. You'd be nothing without me. Amelia leaned forward slightly, her voice quiet but piercing. No, Victor. I was nothing because of you. You clipped my wings. You told me I was small, that I couldn't survive without you. But the moment I left, I began to grow. You didn't make me. You buried me. And I dug myself out. Victor's face twisted, part fury, part disbelief. You planned this, all these years? No, Amelia shook her head slowly. I planned only to live. To be free. But when your empire started to crumble, I saw a choice. Let you fall alone, or stand at the bottom to collect the crown. I chose the crown. Silence fell. The only sound was Victor's ragged breathing. He staggered back a step, suddenly looking older, smaller. His arrogance drained, leaving a hollow man. Do you hate me so much? He whispered. Amelia's expression softened for the briefest moment. No, Victor. Hatred would mean you still mattered to me. You don't. The words landed heavier than any scream could have. Victor collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, his empire gone, his pride shattered. Amelia gathered the signed deeds, sliding them into her folder. She rose, smoothed her suit, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused, her voice clear and final. Enjoy the silence of your own company, Victor. It's the only empire you have left. And then she left him there, broken among the ruins of what once was. Amelia's new office was nothing like Victor's had been. It wasn't lined with gold or marble. There were no ostentatious chandeliers or portraits of herself on the wall. Instead, sunlight streamed through tall windows, warming the wooden floor. The office smelled of fresh flowers and brewed coffee. On the shelves were books on finance, leadership, and history. On the wall hung photographs, not of Amelia alone, but of her team, women smiling, celebrating milestones, laughing over shared victories. She stood by the window, looking out over the city skyline. The sun was setting, painting the buildings in shades of orange and pink. She held a cup of tea in her hand, savoring the quiet. Behind her, Martin entered the room, leaning slightly on his cane. The contracts are all finalized. It's official. Hale Enterprises is yours. Amelia turned, her expression calm. Not Hale Enterprises, she said. Cross Solutions headquarters. Martin chuckled softly. You've come far, Amelia. She nodded. Further than I ever thought possible. He studied her quietly. Do you regret it? Taking it all from him? Amelia's gaze returned to the window. She thought of the mansion, the belt, the laughter of Victor's friends as she stood humiliated. She thought of the bus station, her trembling hands clutching the duffel bag, whispering to herself, I will never be powerless again. And she thought of now, her office, her empire, her freedom. No, she said softly. I don't regret it. But this, she gestured around the room, isn't about him. It's about me. About proving to myself that I could build something, not from fear, but from strength. Martin smiled. Then you've succeeded. He left her alone in the office. Amelia sat at her desk, opening her journal. She wrote slowly, her pen scratching across the paper. True power is not built on cruelty. It is built on respect, on kindness, on self-worth. Empires built on fear always fall. But those built on dignity, they last. She closed the book, placing it carefully on her desk. Across the city, Victor sat alone in a dingy apartment, far from the mansion he once ruled. The curtains hung heavy, the air stale with the smell of cheap whiskey. He stared at an empty glass, his reflection warped in the bottle beside it. Once, men had toasted his name. Now no one called. Once, he had commanded a household through fear. Now silence was his only companion. His empire had collapsed, leaving him a shadow of himself. Back in her office, Amelia rose and walked to the window once more. The city lights flickered alive as night fell, each one a symbol of possibility. Her phone buzzed, an email from a new client, another woman-led startup seeking her guidance. Amelia smiled faintly. She would answer soon. There was work to be done. But for now, she allowed herself a single moment of stillness. A deep breath. A quiet smile. A reflection of the promise she had kept to herself. I will never be powerless again. And she wasn't. If you were Amelia, Would you have walked away forever, or taken back everything piece by piece, just like she did? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of power, revenge, and redemption, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this, and share this video with someone who loves a good twist of justice. Amelia's empire may be rebuilt, but we've only just begun telling stories of triumph like hers.